Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Genre Equality Podcast on the Genre Equality channel. I'm Hitzir.
I'm Isa.
Oh my god, whose music is that? I think Hardi has returned to the podcast.
What?
Oh my god.
It's me. It's always been me.
He's been here this whole time.
I know he's just been listening in the background, but
Yeah.
I've just not let Hardi talk because he's generally so full of shit. So but he begged, and after about just close to 2
Yes.
years, I've decided to let him speak his piece.
Wow.
At least for maybe like 30 minutes per episode, so he doesn't annoy you all so much anyway. But he is new for those of us who have found us on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
So we got to reintroduce Hardi. Hardi was one of our founding members back when this podcast was formed 4 years ago, just about 4 years ago.
It's been 4 years.
Yes, Hardi. How has life been for you for the last 2 years? What's been going on? What's new? What's different?
All right. I mean, I've been working really hard. I got married.
Mhm.
Mm.
Oh yeah, you're a mister now. That's the
Yeah. And it's been quite fun so far. And I now that work has kind of taken a scale down a little. I
Mhm.
decided to reintroduce myself to genre equality.
awesome.
Absolutely, and with Hardi here, he can take some of the load off my back, particularly with one topic that we'll talk about later, Star Trek Discovery, and later on this year, Star Trek Picard.
Uh-huh.
I suppose I'll chime in a little bit in just to say that I've kind of abandoned my first love in sci-fi, Star Trek. Like new Star Trek is just not for me.
Understand.
And Hardi can take over from that. But besides that, we have lots to talk about this month, man, on Genre Equality 50. Of course, we'll be talking about the sixth and final season of The Expanse, which has just recently wrapped up. We'll be talking about the first and only season of Station 11. Plus, I'll be talking about movies like Petite Maman, The Tragedy of Macbeth, Scream 5, alongside shows like Naomi, Archive 81, etc., etc. And for the poll list, right, and you want to stick for this, we'll be discussing the Three Body Problem trilogy, aka The Remembrance of Earth's Past by Lucius Sin,
Yep.
one of the most groundbreaking hard sci-fi series of novels that have come out in the last 20 years, particularly in the Chinese sci-fi scene. But we'll begin with one of the favorite shows that we've ever reviewed on Genre Equality, The Expanse, which has consistently gotten rave reviews from us.
Mhm.
We love this book series, we love this show, and the sixth and final seasons of The Expanse is done, and we are here to pay tribute and say farewell to, I think, the undisputed greatest sci-fi show of the current era.
Oh yeah.
Season 6 picks up with the solar system at war. Marco Inaros and his Free Navy continue to launch devastating asteroid attacks on Earth and Mars. The tensions of war and shared loss threaten to pull the crew of the Rocinante apart. Christian Eversarala, back in the head of the UN, makes bold move after bold move and sends former Martian Marine Bobby Draper on a secret mission with the Rossi that could possibly turn the tide of the conflict. Meanwhile, in the belt, Drummer and what's left of her family are on the run after betraying Marco. And on a distant planet beyond the rings called Laconia, a new alien power begins to arise. Let's begin with let's begin with Hardi, since you're back,
Oh,
right?
yes.
What did you think of season 6 of The Expanse? Was it a satisfying end, or was it hampered by its shorter 6-episode run?
Okay, I doubt it. I don't think it was actually hampered by its 6-episode run. I felt that it closed really well. Most of the main storylines that were going on.
Yeah.
With a lot of there's no time for it. What happens with the proto molecule and all that is not really covered, lah.
Yes.
Sorry, spoiler alert, I guess.
No. Not really, lah. Not really. Still,
Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like. Are we in spoiler territory now, or are we?
No, we'll just give general reviews and then we'll leave spoilers to the end.
So I felt that every big story had a really satisfying conclusion. The whole conflict between Earth, Mars, and the Belt, I felt was one of the best ways it could have ended.
Yeah.
Nothing felt convenient. Like everything was well earned. Like all the moves that Earth did, right? All the mistakes they did, they paid for it. Same way that all the mistakes that Marco and Arios made, he paid for it. So there was real consequences to everybody's actions and all that, and you felt it, and you felt how the politics and all that really like kind of evolved as the 6 episodes went on.
Yeah.
And I like the humanity side of the Expanse, about how they explore humanity and all that. And again, season 6 doesn't disappoint in that aspect. We go on to see how we want to build peace out of war. And
Yes.
that was something that was dutifully done throughout the 6 episodes. I really loved the evolution of all the main characters. I felt that they all had really good endings to it. So all in all, this was a near perfect season. I didn't mind that it was one of the shorter seasons, and I didn't mind that there was other things that were not really it's all about like cliffhangers, right?
Yeah.
But those cliffhangers, I feel, can, if you read the books and all that, you can satisfy it there lah. Yeah.
Yep. What about you, Isa? What do you think about the final season?
Oh man, I think there's something to be said about the achievement of squeezing literally a Wolf's book of arcs into 6 episodes. Very, very tight pacing, very, very well planned, and just in general well structured things. By and large, I agree largely with Hardi. There are a couple of plot points that I felt were a bit rushed necessarily, or not so much in they weren't well earned, but the way in which they were presented was strange, and there were a few characterizations that are old complaints from former episodes that reappear again. Mainly Holden being a giant walking plot device, which again happens, right?
Yes,
like
it did.
no, we're not going to dive into spoilers yet,
Yeah.
but again it happens. But I've made my peace with it. I made my peace with it in season 2, and it's part of the ride, to kind of understand that. But yeah, I totally agree with Hardi. I love the way, I love where our characters have landed at the end of 6 seasons. I love the fact that they took out some time to tease what the future of the universe looks like, with Laconia and all of that. I love the fact that they threw in like little hints kind of here and there. By and large, like having, you know, having kind of our characters sit down for that kind of like meal, right? Which is not a spoiler. Like that for me felt good, right? Right before kind of the climax of everything, before the finale, all of them sitting down, having that meal, right? Was kind of an encapsulation of, at the end of the day, what the show is all about, right? Like it's a tough universe, but someone's got to try and make a difference, and these people are. Definitely the crew has changed and all that, but I do feel like across time, like we've become very invested in all of their stories, more or less. And with some surprising twists and turns here and there, it has been quite a ride, and I'm very happy with the way they decided to kind of wrap it up. I think having the ability to know that it's your last season and you got to stick the landing really does, well, put a fire under your ass and encourage people to, not mess up.
Sure. One of the supposed weaknesses of the Expanse season 6, of course, widely discussed, is its shortness and the fact that it left, as Heidi mentioned, a lot of dangling plot threads with regards to Laconia and the proto-molecule and for aliens in other systems, etc. Right? I think what they want you to do, since this is a very faithful adaptation of the books, is that I think you can easily pick up the novels and continue on. The only big difference that between the show and the novels is that Alex Kamal is dead. That's it. That's the only difference. Other than that, it's exactly the same. If you pick up the next book after the story arc, it time jumps, flash forwards 30 plus years. They would have needed to recast every single actor. It's fit for a reboot, if you want to bring this back 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now. Sure, you can even recast the old actors if they're old enough and they look the part.
Yeah.
But I feel like they picked a spot in the book that's as good as any to end this right now. What are the strengths of the season? Firstly, I think season 6, more than season 5, 4, 3, the action scenes looked and felt the best here.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like they threw a lot of money in that final episode, especially. Space opera, space battles have never looked as good in any show as it looks as good on The Expanse here,
Agreed.
particularly with the climactic battle. We get to spend a lot of time with everyone's growth. Kara G as drummer, I think low-key steals the show this season. Perhaps due to the abbreviated episode order, some characters maybe got a short shaft. I felt that Philip probably wasn't as developed as I'd like him to be. His redemption arc, while I understood it conceptually, feels very rushed because it was. And what are you gonna do? Like, if you're gonna sacrifice a character, like sacrifice that fuckboy Philip, because nobody cares about him. Naomi doesn't care about him. Marco doesn't care about him. The fans don't care about him. His mother, like,
he did have a
was
few
feeling
good moments though.
Yeah.
He did, but it was a little like I would have liked his arc to have more time to breathe because it felt very quick, like his turn. Oh, I made friends with like a guy, and then like now I'm good. Okay. So yeah, I mean those are like very small nitpicky issues. Do you have any small nitpicky issues with The Expanse season 6? So let's start with you, Hardi.
Okay, I mean I know I think this is just the flavor, but I really appreciate that there was a lot more budget in the action scenes and all that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
However, I still felt that I liked it because it's just nitpicky lah, but I guess it was a bit too flashy for The Expanse, I felt sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
Which is weird.
Okay.
Just because I like that The Expanse focuses on like great distances and all that between the ships and all that, where you can barely see. There's barely any real action, just because a real space battle in the future would look something like that, where you're unable to really see your enemy. It's all about the radars and all the all the gadgetry on your ship telling you that you're going to hit your enemy, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I appreciate the budget going into it and all that, and making it a bit more flashy, space opera like, a bit more Star Warsy lah. Yeah. So it's not like I say it's a nitpick. It's just the flavor and all that. So I understood why they went this direction. Also, I like I say it's not a bad or good thing lah. It's just my little nitpick lah. Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Isa?
I think for me, it's again like about the characterization, right? Philip Holden continues to be this walking Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
That I mean, I think I've come to the point where it's like, okay, sure, let's see how they do it now, right? As opposed to be instead of whining about it. Similar complaints to season 5, I think as well. Like, Marcos Inaros is just a caricature of a villain at this point in time, right? And I think this season only serves to highlight that, in contrast to the rest of the characters who have had these like amazing kind of arcs and are finally coming into their own as we reach the conclusion of this arc. Philip, same thing. I think Naomi as well also felt like she was shoehorned into a particular role, in order to deliver some very key, very deep, very important lines. But outside of that, there wasn't much for her besides a few key scenes, And I understand when you have a huge ensemble cast like this, it's hard to divide the time up that way. I'm glad that my show favorites, right, Kamina and Amos, are getting all the screen time that they deserve and ought to get and need, and have those fully fleshed out. I'm glad Bobby got her screen time. I'm glad Avasharala got her screen time. And the rest of them, sure, some sacrifices need to be made, right? And I'm okay with those sacrifices as far as it goes. But those are my nitpicks, basically.
Sweet. Okay. We've kind of talked about the show in general right now, so let's delve a bit into spoiler territory. So if you guys haven't seen The Expanse season 6 and would like not to hear any spoilers, tune out right now. It will be in the timestamps and then come back when we're done. Let's start with you, Hardi. Like,
sure.
now that you're free to talk about anything about season 6, give me the specifics. Like, all the things that you liked and disliked that you talked about in general in like finicky terms. Like, tell me exactly what you mean.
Okay, so like the final space battle thing, when they were coming onto the proto-molecule-ish planet thing.
Oh,
the one the Marines, the station, then they were landing and Amos was flying in his seat.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, that's a bit much. But okay, never mind. Like I said, it was really nitpicky, but I still enjoyed the action though. I love that the tactics and all that were used. You know, like how they constructed a space battle again
Mm.
impresses me all the time. Every single season,
Mm.
whenever I see a space battle, I'm always very impressed at, oh, this is the most realistic space battle that is possible. Anyway,
Mm.
apart from that, I really loved. Okay, so Marcus Scenarius, my only issue with him, right, was that
Yeah.
his speeches were getting less and less. Like, it didn't make sense anymore. Like, why you want
Yeah.
to follow this guy?
Yeah. It's like
He was so charismatic last year.
Correct.
The fact that he devolved this year almost feels like a flaw in the writing because Marco was never this lame.
Yeah.
Ah,
It's essentially like he used to deliver great promos. Sorry to use a
correct.
pressing term, but like now he's just like speaking in generics,
Yes.
with like cheap pops and stuff. It's a bit meh lah. Like I felt like they dropped the ball with Marco this year.
Same, I agree there. So that was another thing that just bothered me a bit. Was like, Marcos, can you like shut up? Like you're gonna lose people, and like so it felt weird that the Free Navy. Okay, but then again, it's a huge navy. Not everybody hears what Marcus says. It's just maybe
Yeah.
the pocket of people around him.
Mm.
Yeah.
And and his supporting characters like Philip. I thought Philip, that's his son's name, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so Philip, I felt was a good counter to that. I just wish, like you all said, like more time for him to develop and all that. A bit rushed. I agree.
Yeah.
I liked his lieutenant.
Oh yeah. What's her name?
She was such a good balance.
Mm?
To be the humanity, the merciful kind of character and all that. Like to understand the where the Belters were supposed to go in the future, lah.
I think she's pragmatic, more pragmatic than merciful, but I know what you mean.
So pragmatic, yeah, that's a better word, correct.
Yeah.
And all that. So the Belter politics, I felt drama's cause was a lot more the course that I would have followed if I was a Belter,
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I felt the best move of this season was the last episode of Holden giving away his title to
Oh my god.
drama. His resignation. His resignation.
Yep. In the first time we ever saw Holden, he turned down a job out of immaturity, and now he turned down a job out of maturity. So it's a full circle character arc kind of thing. What about you, Isa?
Oh man. Okay, so just some kind of like nitpicky plot points, right? Like we've already talked about Marcos. Fully agree with Hardi. Like he goes from like charismatic, like leader, kind of like a genius, at what he's doing,
Tactician,
right? Into just being like every other like egocentric tyrant out there, right? In the span of like a couple of weeks, if we follow that within the timeline, and that to me is very difficult to kind of believe. It's great that they brought in a new first mate that kind of like tempers that and tries to resolve things between the father and son, which I thought all those scenes were great. Very sad to see her go, but part and parcel of the plot lah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what big spoilers. If you guys are still listening because you think okay, this is a massive ass spoiler, right? The way Naomi delivers the final plan to beat Inaros, right, felt so out of place, right? There's something to be said about the fact that at that point in time, the Rocinante has like 3 torpedoes left, right?
Yes.
As opposed to all the way at the beginning of the season where Kamina says like, we have only 3 torpedoes. You compare those 2 scenes, right? And how dire it feels in those scenes.
Yeah.
Where Kamina and her crew in less lines deliver the desperation of their state as opposed to what happens in the Rocinante just prior to Naomi. Like, oh, you know what? We're gonna like fucking wake up the ring, right? And I was just like, why? Like, you that didn't feel earned. Like, how do you jump from that where Holden, right, being the careful, cynical kind of captain that he is when it comes to like strategy and all of that, goes like, we're fine. We got this many. We got 40% on our PDFs. We've got this many torpedoes. We can fight it out. We're gonna take a last stand. Out of nowhere, Naomi is like, I have this brilliant idea. Let's just use the fucking ring, right? And it doesn't feel like apt. I understand why it's done. I understand where it features in the storyline. I understand what it is, what it means for the future of the book. But that scene just didn't click it for me, and I found that to be immersion breaking at that point in time, right? Because it doesn't feel like the odds are as overwhelming as it sounds when they're saying it.
I know he was just eager to kill her no good son.
Yeah, you know, I mean, like obviously her hate for Marco is way
Way more than the love for the son.
yeah, way more than love for
Yeah.
her son. She did try. I mean, honestly, was it season 4 when she was kidnapped?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole sequence with her on board the Pella and all of that, some fantastic scenes, some
Yeah.
fantastic character work. We don't get to see much of that in season 6, which I think is unfortunate. But that was
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Naomi's best moment was her reaction to actually pushing the button to kill her son.
Yeah.
As we know, Philip does survive, but like Naomi doesn't know that. Apparently, the scream that she delivers, like after that, which was muted out, was like kind of improv on her part, and I thought it felt very visceral.
Yeah.
That was
It
the
was,
best
yeah.
Naomi moment of the season, and it came a bit too little, too late.
Also,
yeah.
Isa is PDC, not PDF.
Oh, sorry. As you
Yeah.
can see, my mind is wrapped up in work.
PDF.
You can convert that.
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Look, like highest conversion rate of any religion in the world, PDF.
Any final thoughts, like spoilery thoughts that either of you have?
Oh man.
Earth was
Spoilery.
Earth was just really aggressive this season.
Yeah, but I mean,
But they were getting attacked throughout, so that's why.
for sure.
Mhm.
I think Avasrala did an amazing. Like she is a masterclass in people management. It's
Yeah.
insane how good she is at it, right? For her to rap, like even that meeting that she had with Kamina, oh my god, that was so good. That was hair-standingly good.
Yeah.
For the two of them just to like show up in the middle of the market and like have their discussion there, I thought was insane. Both actresses at the peak of their power.
But then because of like the strength of what's her name, Christian
Avasrala.
Yeah.
because of her, right? So we got very little of Mars.
Yes.
You know, we got a lot of Earth. Mars was kind of like a supporting character, even though like Mars had like the stronger navy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I do feel like they kind of resolved that in season 4 as well, right? With Bobby kind of like going undercover.
Undercover,
Yeah, Mars is a lot more fractured as a government than they were before, right? And of course, like continually taking damage from the Belter, our free navy and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I understand.
Most of them went through the rings to colonize.
That is true.
So
Yeah.
Mars is pretty much gone, as we knew it, as we knew it in the first 3 seasons.
Yeah.
So I totally understand why Chrissy is like at the head of the forefront of that. But with any sort of of organization where everything rests on a single person, right? Then naturally the organization inherits the flaw of that single person. If she didn't have the Rossi, right? If Kamina didn't come on board, then Earth would be in a much poorer place than it is. You know, I just love the fact that she's constantly conflicted and has to make hard decisions, but she never shies away from making those decisions, which is in contrast to Holden, I think, who either has decisions made for him or makes stupid decisions and all of that, right? But ends up the plot moves forward because of him nonetheless. So outside of that, spoiler wise, I'm fucking excited to see if they do a season 7 for the time jump. I'm super excited for this new whatever's in Duarte. Him as the
the
villain.
Laconian Imperial Navy future basically.
Yeah, right. Because there's this whole thing. If you guys are still listening, there's a whole thing about the end credits for the last episode. You guys can go read up about that. How those are actually spoilers or whatever.
The third of the Martians that left, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Right. Like this new villain character that we are seeing, I love it. I love it so far. It looks intensely like manipulative, like real evil. Like Marcos is understandable evil. This one feels like real evil. His lines about "I've got gods to kill" send shivers down my spine. I really want to see that.
Yes. My favorite part of, I guess, the ending was, of course, the roundtable discussion that Mars had with Earth and the Belts, and trying to, elect the new transport union, transport authority leader, etc., etc. Specifically with Holden, who has always been, I guess, the morality of the show. He is kind of the new age beta male protagonist that may not be fun to watch because he doesn't make cool or badass decisions, but somehow, I mean, through plot convenience, makes the right moral ones.
Yeah.
But he does mention that Marco, for all his egocentricity and his genocide, essentially wasn't all wrong, because he had like so many good points, and it was important, I think, for the show not to discount the belt and legit grievances just because Marco did this thing.
Yeah.
So it was important for the show to say that because Earth has always been portrayed as the good guys,
Yeah.
but like I like that the show brought back the idea that at the very first scene that we saw Christian was her torturing a belter on hooks, right?
Yeah.
Like Earth has its flaws, and why the belt decided to attack Earth in that way was based on some very real things, some very valid concerns.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they addressed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that was it for me. Any last thoughts before we give our ratings?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Hardi, what's your rating?
Are we doing points or by grade?
Let's do it out of 10.
Out of 10, I'll give it like a 9 out of 10.
Wow, that's quite high. Okay. What about you, Isa?
I'm gonna give it an 8. Right.
Yeah.
I think like they've wrote on like a lot of goodwill over the last 5 seasons, and season 6 didn't disappoint at all. Right. So I'm gonna give it a solid 8 for me.
I'm giving it a 7.5, which is also quite high. I mean, all three of us have like different standards to clear and whatever, but 7.5, 8, and 9 are all very good ratings. So they're always like it's either A plus, A, or A minus. So very well done. How does the Expanse rank for you in terms of all-time great space operas? Does it make your Mount Rushmore, or does it fall just below certain other shows?
No, I think this has hit the Mount Rushmore already.
Okay, so what is your Mount Rushmore of like space opera type of stuff?
I mean, your Star Wars.
Sure, okay. TV shows.
Oh, TV shows? Oh.
Yeah, Star Wars not fair because
Star Wars not fair.
Well, with what Star Wars is doing with their TV now,
which are not space operas though. They're gangster westerns.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me,
okay, for me, Firefly will be one of them.
Yep.
Okay.
Man in the High Castle wasn't bad. Sci-Fi.
Not a space opera.
Oh yeah,
not a space opera.
But they had time. Okay, yeah, that's true. Not space opera. We're doing space opera.
It never went to space a single time in Man in the High Castle.
Sorry, no, I was thinking of another show. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh shit! All the things. Okay, Star Trek. DS9.
Sure.
Right. Star Trek. Next Gen.
Sure.
And then what did I say? What was my first one that I picked just now?
Firefly. So the Expanse will be your fourth lah.
And then fourth
of your Mount Rushmore. Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Isa? Does it rank as high as Hardi's does?
Okay, it definitely breaks my top 5 at the moment. Given how little we've gotten of like true space opera in the last decade or so, I think Expanse has to rank top. Like I agree with all Hardi's choices. Like those definitely sit very, very high for me in terms of all-time space operas. But those are at this point in time classics almost, right, as far as sci-fi goes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
For sure. And I don't think anything has come close within the last decade or so. So I'm gonna put.
I would say last 20 years, nothing really come close.
Yeah.
Last 20 years is a bit strong, but last 10 years definitely. Because there are two shows in the last 20 years that I think top the Expanse, but last 10 years definitely the past decade. Number 1, best sci-fi show, and number 2, best space opera show. No question in the last 10 years. It doesn't quite crack the top 5 for me because I would rank Firefly, Farscape, DS9, Babylon 5, and Battlestar Galactica above the Expanse.
Yeah. I definitely had Firefly, Battlescape, Battlestar, and Babylon 5 up there in terms of all time. I didn't think about Farscape. I actually need to.
Yeah, I didn't think about Farscape at all. Also, but that was a good choice.
Yeah, that's from like the mid '90s, so it was like a bit of it was way back.
Babylon 5, that's a good choice also.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was always the big debate between Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine fans because they were such similar shows.
Because it's on a space station.
Correct, exactly. With the same type of dynamics, the same type of very dark political undertone to it and everything. Farscape was just pure escapist space opera, and Battlestar Galactica, I think, does the politics
Yeah.
and the post 9/11 darkness better than the Expanse did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Until it sort of fell apart in its final season, but like, what are you going to do? But for the most part, it was, I think, better lah. But yeah, the Expanse definitely for the last 10 years, number one.
Okay.
Yeah, that was our review for the final season of the Expanse. We may come back maybe in the future once I finish reading the books to see, to maybe give a pull list review about how the Expanse continues.
Yep.
But I haven't gotten there yet, so give me some time. Let's move on though to topic number 2, which is a mini series called Station 11.
Ooh.
If you look at the timing of HBO Max's Station 11, it is either very unfortunate or very spectacular, depending on how you look at it.
Yep.
This 10-part adaptation of Emily St. John Mandel's acclaimed novel about the aftermath of a flu pandemic that wipes out 99% of humanity arise while we're still, fretting about the impact of each new COVID variant and how it will impact our lives, right? And I think many viewers may simply not have the tolerance for scenes where people cough in public spaces and hoard supplies and debate about the efficacy of masks in an airborne plague. But the majority of the limited series, as adapted by Patrick Somerville and directed by Atlanta's Hiro Murai, actually takes place 20 years in the future, where we follow Kristen, played by Mackenzie Davis, who you may know from Blade Runner 2049, Halt and Catch Fire,
Terminator.
Terminator, San Junipero, and lots of other stuff. She plays this character named Kristen, who tours the American Midwest with a company of actors and musicians called the Traveling Symphony, who perform Shakespeare plays for survivors eager to experience any bit of culture from the world they once knew. And the show, through those Shakespearean plays and those improv acting shows that they put on, explores what art can and cannot heal, as well as what pieces of old society could or should potentially survive such an apocalypse. And it feels even more relevant and powerful than when the book was published in 2015, particularly because we're living in the midst of a flu pandemic.
Yeah.
And the show sounds bleak because of its premise, but it's actually a marvelous blend of both despair and whimsy, because I think the show's reliance on flashbacks and other non-linear storytelling is also by far the smartest and most effective use of those devices that TV has seen in quite a while, since The Watchmen, I would say. And Station 11 also features some of the year's most tear-inducing moments, a healthy mix of very quirky, very funny comedy, some very riveting oddness, some magical realism. And despite the seemingly, again, bleak subject matter, the action and suspense of Kristen trying to protect her friends from various cults or whatever, right? Station 11 is actually surprisingly goofy and surprisingly light on its feet. With sometimes there is an impromptu rap cover of A Tribe Called West breaking out to liven up a tense moment, or there are magical sequences of pregnant ladies dancing to TLC's Creep in a department store. There's even a moving rendition of Hamlet that manages to solve everyone's problems and heal old wounds in the final episode. So this is the rare post-apocalyptic dystopia that emphasizes hope instead of cynicism. It's the anti-Walking Dead.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah. Hardi, you've recently finished watching all the episodes here. What do you think about Station 11?
I would say now they're literally, I cannot find a single flaw in this show.
Yeah, same.
Like, I loved it so much. Great acting all around, great writing, just beautiful. It was like a beautiful rendition of a pandemic. Like, you saw the pandemic on a wide scale, and then on a very intimate scale within a family, within two characters, throughout the entire, because it's a lot of flashbacks here and there. Yeah. So you had that sense of what it was like throughout the years, and you can only accomplish really appreciating it when you watch all the episodes relatively close to one another. Like, just because of the back and forth can get a bit confusing at times. Yeah, but because I managed to catch most of the episodes in 1 or 2 sittings only, so for me it felt like a great tapestry of time. What happened in that 20 years since the pandemic, and beautifully acted by Mackenzie Dunn. Wait,
Davis.
Davis. Who's Mackenzie Dunn?
Mackenzie Dunn is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, world champion,
yeah.
Yes,
MMA
thank you.
fighter in the
Sorry.
UFC.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
cross wires so bad that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yes.
I would watch Mackenzie Dunn act. Yeah.
She's also very good. She can just triangle people everywhere in a post-apocalypse.
That's
That would be a
true.
good show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so Station 11, that moment before the pandemic strikes, it felt so real.
Yeah.
Like it felt like, and that's because we just went through it.
Mhm.
Therefore Byron, our flu is not so deadly lah.
Yes.
It's just, but it's still, you just felt it in your soul, as you're watching it.
The reaction, some people wanted to hoard, some people don't believe what they're watching on the
Yeah.
news, some people don't want to wear masks, some people do, things like that. Like we see it all. We've seen it all play out.
Exactly, and we have experienced it in real life as well. So it was a weird thing where fiction matches reality lah.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, like, this show was filmed before COVID-19.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it was a good piece of luck for them, I guess. That the pandemic really hit us lah.
Yeah.
Anyway, overall, I have I cannot find any flaws in this show. I love the mythology that you're building, around the comic book Station 11, used by the two characters lah, who one who memorized it and one who carries it around. Actually, both memorized it lah.
Yeah, both pretty much memorized it.
Yeah, I know, and how that story, intertwines the entire tapestry of the 6 episodes. So beautifully done. The whole Shakespearean angle also really, really does very well in this. The need to preserve art has a certain importance to it, especially in a world where everything is devastated and everything is gone, and how we take it for granted. Like Wikipedia and all that suddenly becomes such an important facet of life.
The scenes of the people at the airport downloading Wikipedia as much as possible was actually quite horrific, but real. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like I would do that. I feel I will start downloading Wikipedia
before the internet shuts down.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
How about you?
And yeah, it's. I feel like the thing that I gravitated most towards it is because I've watched a lot of post-apocalyptic shows. A lot of sci-fi is post-apocalyptic. A lot of it is, and this is the first one I think that argues that the world is, for the most part, a better place once the old systems are gone and people can begin anew. If you notice, the theme of the show was the people who are born post-pandemic are very naive and innocent, and all the danger comes from the people who were born pre-pandemic, who are manipulative and suspicious and dangerous. It also argues, refreshingly, as we live in a country where artists are not essential workers, it argues that like art and stories are what can help us understand each other and communicate things that are too painful to say out loud. It's art and stories that get us through the dark times and the tragedies, and it has been, I don't know, it's been a long time. It's been 2 years since I've given a 10 out of 10 review on genre equality. The last 10 out of 10 was for Watchmen in 2019. And as you can see, I don't give out perfect scores willy-nilly. Like it's something that doesn't even happen once a year. It happens once every 2 or 3 years. And it happens so rarely. But I think, much like Hardi said, I'm trying to think of a nitpick. I'm trying to think of something that went wrong with the show. The ensemble is perfect. Not just Mackenzie Davis, but the girl who plays the younger version of her is very good as well. Everyone, Jeevan and the entire cast is perfect. This is just a perfect show that deserves a perfect score. It's a 10 out of 10 for me. What about you, Hardi?
Much to contrary to popular belief, even though I'm more lenient, I've never given a 10 out of 10.
I think you did for BoJack season 4 and 5.
Oh yes, correct. That might be the only one, right? Though. Yeah,
that's the only one I
don't think you've ever given anything.
Yeah, so since then, this is my 10 out of 10 also.
Oh shit! Okay.
Yeah, so since 2 years ago, so 10 out of 10s are very rare.
How did you rate The Watchmen, by the way, Hardi? I forgot.
I think it was a 9.
Oh, close to a 10, but not a 10.
A 9 or 9.5 or something like that. I know it's super high because I loved it too.
Sure, yeah. It's the same production team that did Watchmen, and The Leftovers is also the one set in Station 11. Yes. I love also the stories about, the origin story of the artist behind Station 11, which is the
Yes.
comic within the show.
Yes.
Who, the comic obviously plays a big part in the actual story of
Mhm.
the show. The first line in the comic is "I remember damage," which is the theme of the show. But at the same time, also I do love that once Jeevan read the comic book, there's this episode 6 or 7 when he read the comic and he was just like pretentious,
Yes.
which the comic is, to be fair.
Yes.
So I love that at least one character thought the comic was pretentious, because it had, it sometimes felt pretentious when they were doing the voiceovers and stuff, of, like narrating the comic.
Yes. Yes.
I was like, yeah, this is very artsy. I don't know whether a lot of people would like it, but okay.
But it also came from the
Um,
voice of someone of pre-pandemic. You see, like I
yeah,
know
yeah.
that honestly, both characters are also pre-pandemic. The boy and the small girl are also pre-pandemic, but they're young and innocent still.
Maybe Kristen more so than the guy, because of his relationship with his father and all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. They straddle the borderline between
Yeah.
pre and post pandemic. Any final thoughts on Station 11 before we move on?
Hard recommend. Please watch this.
Yeah, super hard recommend. I have not seen a show this good that is genre for a long time. Like, there are stuff that is non-genre that I will give 10 out of 10 to,
Oh, yeah.
but I think for a good 2.5 years,
Mhm.
I've not seen a genre show this good.
This is like art house genre.
Yeah, that can make you feel like hopeful and optimistic, but at the same time also tear-jerking. A believable look at how humanity would cope post-pandemic
Mhm.
and during a pandemic. As you can see, like me and Hardi have talked about how prescient it is. The fact that this was filmed before COVID-19, and they kind of like basically pinpointed every single reaction that all different types of people will have to a pandemic.
Yep.
It's so well done. It's so perfect.
Yeah.
It's as prescient as Watchmen was before Black Lives Matter. It's
Oh my
that
god, yeah,
good.
you're right.
Yeah. So yeah, 10 out of 10 once again. Super hard recommend.
Mhm.
This is where I'm gonna
Take a break.
take a little break. And Hardy is gonna talk about season 4 of I don't influence your rating or anything lah. But season 4 of like one of the worst shows I've ever seen, Star Trek Discovery. Let's go.
You know how we just watched The Expanse and how they try to build this government between three different factions.
Yeah.
And I talked
Yeah.
about consequences and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's none of that in Star Trek.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
A lot of it feels like they were dreaming a very big world building scenario. It's just that I felt they didn't capitalize on such a great period of time that they decided to go into, which was far future. The whole the whole issue, the lithium, having to be they exploded and all that, and now they have to what do you call it, redistribute the lithium to everybody so everybody can be connected again into this oneness of the galaxy and all that. There were so many opportunities that I felt season 4 kind of just didn't hit. There was this big bad and all that stuff. I don't want to emphasize, I don't want to talk too much about Star Trek Discovery, just that I felt that again the focus was wrong, because the focus again was on Michael and her relationships and all that stuff. Like, I felt that the side characters are the ones that are more intriguing in Star Trek Discovery, from the doctor to the guy, that the scientist, the engineers, to the first the third officer. There's so many other guys that deserved like an episode where they talked about them, just them, or like to explore different periods of this new world that they have discovered. No pun intended. But it always felt safe in the end. Or there was always this sense of like Deus Ex Machina, like things are solved so easily sometimes.
Yep.
Like, they didn't have the heart of Trek, I feel. There's, like I said, like, you cannot win me on a Star Trek show with flashy graphics, with cool battle scenes, cool explosions and all that. That doesn't work when you're watching a Star Trek show.
Mhm.
A Star
Yeah.
Trek show must on its own have strong politics in it, strong tensions between races, like different alien species and all that stuff, and how the what do you call it, the fleet, right, goes in to solve it.
Yeah, Star Trek has, and it's from the beginning, from the 60s show, it's been anthropological. You go to different societies, you learn about it.
Yes.
And I feel like Discovery has never, or very rarely does that,
And it's just like the surface level kind of learning, like it's like you're reading like the first part of the Wikipedia entry, and then that's it, and then we go on and move on or whatever to the more action stuff and all that. Like there's so many like races that I wanted to know more about and all that. Like I think the only good thing was like last season when they delved more into what's the race of the first officer?
Saru's.
Vulcan.
Saru's race.
Oh, Saru, yeah.
Kamina. When they
Yep.
were really in Kamina, and you really learn a lot about the Kaminarians and all that stuff. Here they tried to they talked about a bit of the Vulcan Romulan like unity thing, but didn't really delve deeply into it. Also, everything felt like half-hearted or half-baked ideas that weren't fully realized, I feel.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that this is the worst Discovery season, but second worst, I feel. Like I'm just it's just more of a disappointment for me rather than like it's really all out bad. Like I felt they could have done a lot more. They could have gotten into a lot of like Deep Space Nine territory, where they really explored like characters and all that. That was something that was missing again for the fourth season. Yeah, so a great disappointment I felt because of where they were and how much world building was possible for them.
Yeah.
And they just didn't utilize it, I feel.
Yeah. The thing that strikes me about Discovery and all the other spin-offs, including Picard, which makes me very sad to see it, is that okay? Number one, on the good side, let's look at the bright side. Star Trek has never looked better. I guess it looks very shiny and looks very pretty. But Star Trek also has never been this dumb. Like ever.
Yeah.
It's never been dumber. And I'm talking about a show from the 60s. Like shows from the 60s how can a show from 2022 be less
Clever.
sociologically or politically clever than a show from the 1960s? Trek has never been this dumb. It's very like intellectually empty and filled with very paper thin characters and stories that pay no heed to the ideals of diplomacy or anthropology or sociology that fuel Star Trek from the 60s to 2005. The reason I say 2005 is that's when Enterprise ended, and then after that, boy, this franchise has gone to hell from the J.J. Abrams reboot.
And Enterprise wasn't like the greatest Star Trek show, but it had certain like great moments in it and like certain Trekkie ideals that kept the show very Star Trek.
Remember the days when we thought that Enterprise was like the worst Star Trek show? And then like, whoa boy, now Enterprise feels like one of the best Star Trek shows. It's just
so weird.
You got to see the levels.
Yeah, you have to see the levels, you're right.
It's a bit like how the sequels have made people appreciate the prequels in Star Wars.
Agree.
Yeah. So this is about it, but I don't like. How would you rate this, Hardi, season 4?
I'll give it a 4 out of 10, lah.
Okay, that's quite generous actually. It's near pass.
I mean, because of certain characters that I still like, and there are still moments in it. It's not like I totally hated the show. It's just I wish that the show could be more.
Yeah, same.
So it's a 4 just because I felt that again they didn't fulfill the potential that they were given, lah.
Yeah, that's as concise a review as you can get for Star Trek Discovery season 4. And Hardi will also be talking about Star Trek Picard because I can't be bothered. But that's about it. I'm cutting you off, Hardi. This is it for this episode. Yeah.
That was fun though.
Man, I'm happy.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back, man.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely can't wait to delve more into next episode. But you guys go ahead, talk about DOTA and Scream 5 and Hilda.
Yeah.
Things I didn't watch.
Things I didn't watch. But Hardi will be back in the next episode to talk about the Book of Boba Fett, Peacemaker, The Legend of Vox Machina.
Oh my god, I
and
can't wait
like
for that. Peacemaker and Legend of Vox Machina. And the Book of Boba
Yes,
Fett.
yes. All big titles.
All big ones. Yes.
Big ones. All right. Take care, Hardi. Have a good one.
All right. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Next up, I'm going to be talking to you about Petite Maman, which is one of my favorite films that have come out 2020 this year. It comes to you from the director of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Céline Sciamma. You can listen to our review of Portrait of a Lady on Fire in our Behold archives because we raved about it. It was one of our favorite films from 2019. Well, my favorite film from 2019, and I think Isa caught it just last year.
Yep.
But it remains one of my favorite films of the 21st century and one of the best French films I've ever seen. So go check out Portrait of a Lady on Fire if you haven't. But her new film, Céline Sciamma's new film, that is called Petite Maman. Unsurprisingly, already a contender for one of the best films of the year. But like I said, like anyone expecting a sweeping or passionate period piece should probably, recalibrate their expectations because this is something very different. This film is intimately focused on a handful of characters, 3 to 4 at most, with one single fantastical setting up its direct narrative through line. Josephine Sanz, she plays Nellie, who is an 8-year-old daughter of a woman named Marion. So Marion, the mother, is under enormous stress. Marion's own mother, meaning Nellie's grandmother, has just died in a care home, a nursing home, from long-term complications of a hereditary bone disorder, which Marion herself has. But when she was young, she got cured of it via a painful operation when she was about Nellie's age. So young Nellie asks her mom if she can keep her grandmother's cane, and Marion agrees, sort of blankly agrees like that. And then Marion and her partner take Nellie on a difficult journey to her late mother's house where she grew up. And the memories come flooding back, particularly that of a secret tree hut that she built in the woods adjoining the house. Marion is so overwhelmed with grief that she leaves Nellie alone with her dad. And Nellie, being an only child, much like her mother, is used to solitude. So her mother's absence, whether physical or emotional, is something that she has to deal with all her life. So she goes out into the woods to play. And she comes across what appears to be a half-finished hut in a clearing. And a little girl, her age, looking exactly like her, happily waves to her, asking her to help make it. She is the mirror image of Nellie. In fact, she's so mirror image that she's actually played by Gabrielle Sands, who is Josephine's twin sister. And she announces that her name is Marion. So after they play together, they go back to Marion's house, which appears to be, again, an eerie mirror image of Nellie's mother's own childhood home. There, Nellie meets Marion's kindly withdrawn 30-something mom who walks painfully with a cane. So is this a time travel fairy tale, a ghost story? Whatever it is, Petite Maman is very short, only 72 minutes. It is sweet, it's thoughtful, it is a profound parable about girlhood, motherhood, memory, and friendship. It is very enchanting. In the cyclical, ethereal narrative of this very inventive, tender story of love and loss, one of the finest French filmmakers of our time spins a spellbinding web. It features wonderful performances from the twin girl sisters, Josephine and Gabrielle. Petite Maman hits all the right notes, creating a sort of mini epic an epic in miniature. It achieves so much emotional resonance that in short span, Petite Maman is, among other things, a beautiful ode to a mother-daughter love, and this kind of melancholy acknowledgement that distance that always of the distance that always exists in a relationship when both parties are separated by age and responsibility. You see how Nellie gets along with her mother when her mother is Nellie's age, but at the same time, when experience and growth and pain and trauma have shaped you to the adult that you are, you perhaps forget the child in you. This is a 9.5 out of 10 for me. Super highly rated.
Nice.
You can watch it if you live in Singapore, that is. You can watch it exclusively at the projector. So shout out to the projector for the screening of this one. Next up, also can be seen at the projector, but at the same time also can be seen on Apple TV Plus, is The Tragedy of Macbeth. Before anyone tells me that Macbeth is not genre, like fuck right off. There's magic, there's witches, there's visions, there's ghosts. This particular A24 adaptation of the Shakespeare classic is held by Joel Coen, who is, of course, of the Coen brothers fame, and features magnificent performances from Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. As we all know, or perhaps some of you don't, but this is a widely adapted and widely read story. It follows a Scottish lord played by Denzel who becomes convinced by an oracle that he will become the next king of Scotland. It also, at the same time, follows his ambitious wife, Lady Macbeth, played by McDormand, who supports him in his plans of seizing power. This production makes this story of treachery, murder, and the psychological cost of crossing moral boundaries feel very timeless. Shakespeare loyalists out there may be reassured that that Coen has been faithful to the original text. All he does is trim bits here and there, mostly for flow. And it's not an extreme abbreviation, but I think, in my humble opinion, Macbeth needs a bit of abbreviation, and Joel Coen does it here.
Yeah.
The words are verbatim Shakespeare's. There's no change in that. But the one, I suppose, notable plot change is that he's made the three witches, aka the Weird Sisters,
Yeah.
into one schizophrenic oracle with three personalities.
Sure.
And it's played to chilling perfection by Catherine Hunter. But it's not a big change. She's still an oracle. She still tells Macbeth the exact same thing. Some people not steeped in Shakespeare might be concerned about whether that sort of rich language would be a barrier. I know a lot of people feel that's a concern, but I think the film's excellent cast handles the text very well, giving it a modern enough delivery that's fairly easy to follow. It is shot in beautiful black and white, and the sets are spare and cold, almost stagey, intentionally so. Stone walls surround the characters with little beyond what is functional for basic human needs. There's just a table or a bed or a chair. There is nothing to indicate that the rooms have ever held life or joy, and that's purposeful. Even the scenes outside are stark. All this adds so much to the mood of coldness and murkiness and ethereal creepiness. This is one of Washington's quietest and most nuanced performances. He is a powerful actor, and he's often cast in roles that take advantage of his force of nature quality.
Yeah.
So much so that I feel like Denzel in this century, in the 21st century, has become Al Pacino-esque in his, a caricature of himself. King Kong ain't got nothing on me, etc.
Yeah.
But here he pulls inward to great effect. And McDormand's Lady Macbeth is a complex woman at a certain age of her life. There are no children here, no sense of family. And in this cold house where she is stuck, one wonders what her life has been like, and where she will go from here. Lady Macbeth is often seen as a wildly ambitious woman, pushing her husband towards immorality. But in McDormand's hands, her motivations and actions feel subtler. Macbeth isn't just a story about power and murder, it's also a study of the abdication of moral responsibility. It's a study of people who push each other to a point of being unable to stop themselves because of ambition.
Yeah.
And the film captures that theme in brutal, taut, and most importantly, brisk fashion at only 90 minutes. This was very riveting. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 for me. Yeah, I mean, Isa, you've seen a lot of Macbeth, right?
Yeah.
Are you planning to see this one?
Yeah, I'll definitely catch it sometime soon. I have heard some criticisms from it, but overall, just from your description and stuff like that, I'm definitely. I don't think I've not seen an adaptation of Macbeth yet that's come to the big screen. So just if for nothing else, I just want to see how it compares to everything. I do remember we caught the last adaptation of Macbeth together.
Michael Fassbender, yeah.
The one with Fassbender together. How do you feel that this kind of stacks up in comparison to that, or are they entirely different vehicles?
I would give the Fassbender film 6 out of 10, whereas this is an 8, so it stacks up very highly. It's superior to the Fassbender film, for sure.
Okay.
I particularly enjoy Shakespeare adaptations, particularly for something like Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet, etc., that have been adapted 500 million times.
Yeah.
You think there are a lot of Spider-Man movies. Wait till you see how many times Shakespeare has been adapted over the last hundreds of years, right? And I always appreciate when someone has a different visual or stylistic take on something that is so well worn. That's particularly why so many people love the Leonardo DiCaprio Romeo and Juliet, right? Because it felt so different. There's such a wild take on it. And similarly, this is visually, at least, it's a very radical take on Macbeth, and I really like it. Let's move on though to season 2 of one of my favorite new animes from last year. It's called DOTA's Dragon Blood. It's obviously based on the famous Dota video game.
Yep.
I've caught season 2, but I'm a bit out of breath right now, so I'm going to give it to Isa. What do you think about DOTA's Dragon Blood season 2?
Oh man, I think it starts off well enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I will have to say, unlike the first season, and I think this is just in general with any sort of world building that you're trying to attempt at a large scale, especially for a popular franchise like
Yeah,
Dota, uh,
yeah,
creators often get lost within their own world building. And as a result of that,
yeah,
I do feel that season 2 of Dota Dragonlord, while I enjoyed it by and large, gets very confusing.
yeah.
There is a lot of plot threads that are mentioned but never tackled or brought up in
Mm-hmm.
the middle of a fight, and like you're expected to know what's going on. The problem
Mm-hmm.
is that at this point in time, there is simply isn't enough content or literature out there regarding like Dota's general law for you to kind of fill in the blanks. And I find that to be a frustrating um, just point of contention with season 2.
Mm-hmm.
We do follow again all the characters that we were introduced in kind of season 1, right? With Davion and Princess Mirana and all of that. There are a
Mm-hmm.
great many revelations which are spoilery, so we're not going to get into that
Yep.
as we go along. But there's just a lot of yeah, a lot of stuff is brought up but never dealt with. A lot of stuff is thrown in your face in the
Mm-hmm.
midst of like a very high stakes conflict
Yep.
that never get dealt with emotionally via the characters or for enough time for you as an audience member to kind of like process what that means to the greater world. It does feel a
Yeah.
tad rushed. And those are just kind of my main complaints about that. But I will say they have stepped up the action sequences in season 2. They are very
Mm.
grand, they're very huge in scale, extremely epic fight scenes I think in my opinion like more violence than we got in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't quite mesh together as well. I went into season 1 thinking,
Mm.
okay, let's see, Castlevania's kind of established something. Let's see where Dota goes with this. Very impressed with season 1. Not as impressed with season 2, but I do think it is still a decent watch for fans of season 1.
Yep.
But you do have to do more homework, I think, to like fully enjoy what is presented to you. Um, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. What did you think?
I didn't like it.
Yeah,
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 that's my short review. I dropped off after episode 3
mhm,
and I never came back.
yeah. I mean, given that it was a very short season in total,
Yeah,
and I'll be very honest, I kind of like turned off for most of the non kind of fight scenes.
sure.
Yeah, it feels like it's not so much a drop in quality, but like the
Yep.
pacing fell off,
Mm-hmm.
the plotting fell off, some of the character work felt very slipshod. So I totally understand how you would drop off at episode 3.
How would you rate it in the end?
I'm just gonna give it a flat 5. All right,
Okay.
for this
Okay.
season, I think we gave season 1 fairly good reviews, right? Like it was 6-ish or 7-ish.
So I
Uh,
think it was 7. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and for good reason. I do think I'm not really sure why. I have a nagging suspicion that it is crumbling under its own weight, right? And in
Mm.
addition to that, since season 1 has come out, we have had a slew of game-based animation series
Mm-hmm.
that have come out that have raised the bar
Yep.
significantly.
Definitely.
Arcane being one of them that
Mm.
we favored greatly. And yeah, I think it's coming kind of this particular niche of genre, right? Video game adaptations, usually fantasy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
are coming sharper into focus in terms of where they stand overall, right? We've gotten several seasons of Castlevania right now. We've added the new Witcher animation to this. We've got Arcane that recently came out and one of our favorites from last year.
Yeah.
And yeah, season 2 just didn't rank as highly. A lot of things that they need to kind of work out. Um,
Okay.
Maybe it could have been split into 2 seasons. Season 2, maybe that would have
Mm-hmm.
helped, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking about crumbling under its own weight, I'm going to talk about Scream 5, which is the fifth entry in the already, from the beginning, exceedingly meta Scream franchise.
Yeah.
This fifth one takes place 25 years after a streak of brutal murders that first shocked the quiet town of Woodsboro. A new killer has donned the Ghostface mask and begins targeting a group of teenagers to resurrect secrets from the town's deadly past. it is held by the directors of Ready or Not, which is one of my favorite horror comedies in recent years. This latest entry is probably the best of the franchise since the
Ooh.
first one.
Okay.
Since the first one, yeah.
Yeah.
So it goes Scream 1, Scream 5, and then all the rest of the trash. All the Scream entries are very self-aware, but this latest one takes it up a notch. The Gen Zers in this installment are just as horror savvy as their 90s counterparts. Case in point, the opening scene is a riff on, the classic opening scene in Scream 1 where Drew Barrymore is terrorized by the phone, in the 1996 original, right? And the snarky teenager tells on a modulated, using a modulated voice, that she's into elevated horror. She is name dropping A24's greatest hits while condescendingly explain that those films are more than just cheap thrills. They are metaphors, which is, why a lot of people hate A24 fans, as much as I love A24. But it knows it's horror.
Yeah.
Like, these people know horror and they know horror tropes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they've included the elevated horror of A24's canon into this right now also. In a signature Scream moment, at one point, a character breathlessly monologues about the concept of a requel, which is a reboot sequel that tries to take a franchise back to its roots by combining legacy characters with new ones, whose family tree contains the secret to the killer's motive. It leans into the franchise's genre intelligence, swerving and ducking and kind of winking at the audience like a meta whodunit slasher. It proudly proclaims itself to be, a meta whodunit slasher. However, it is much similar to the Matrix Resurrections, where there's only kind of so much winking and nodding and self-awareness that you can take before the meta-ness wears off and you realize that, you know what, actually you're right. We have seen this and done this all before.
Yeah.
In fact, the certain instances of nostalgia and meta-ness actively disrupts the momentum of the story. So it is, in fact, a detractment rather than a compliment. So all in all, solid effort, 6 out of 10. Appreciate the effort, but I think the Scream franchise should just be left for dead at this moment. Next up, I'm going to be talking about Archive 81, which is Netflix's new 8-episode supernatural horror series. Archive 81 is adapted loosely from a podcast of the same name. It follows an archivist named Dan Turner who becomes obsessed with the subject of old videotapes he was hired to restore. So what's on these tapes? It's a documentary following a grad student named Melody Pandras who is doing an oral history of a strange apartment complex that fell victim to a mysterious fire. As his restoration continues, he discovers that the tapes tell the story of a malevolent cult and some supernatural phenomena. To its credit, its first episode is brisk and tense and efficiently told. Unfortunately, it later gives way to what I like to call the Netflix bloat, as later installments are filled with kind of padded out incidents and red herrings and dead ends, and it should have been 3 hours long rather than 7 or 8, so it's Netflix lah. What you gonna do? The conclusion is satisfying. So be prepared for a great first 2 episodes and a great last 2 episodes, and for everything in the middle to just feel like, boy, why is this here? So yeah, it's a 6 out of 10 for me. Next up, I'm going to be talking about Naomi, which is the latest in the CW's long line of DC shows. It is based on Brian Michael Bendis' comic. Naomi is seemingly a normal black girl living in the Prime universe. If you don't know what the Prime universe is, it's an ordinary universe like ours with no superheroes or no superpowers. It's been widely established in DC canon what the Prime universe is. And she's this super fangirl of Superman comics and runs a website dedicated to, in her universe, the fictional hero. So unlike other CW heroes, she is super well adjusted, has a great relationship with her adopted parents, goes to parties, does well in school, has an active social life. She is not burdened by trauma like Batman or Arrow or whatever. However, things change when she discovers that she does have superpowers and wonders where they come from, because this is a world with no superpowers. As it turns out, she wasn't born in Prime Earth, but rather in a different Earth in the multiverse that was destroyed. So much like her idol Superman, baby Naomi was kind of sent by her birth parents as a refugee to from her dying Earth to this much safer Earth, and one that is relatively normal, I guess. So the show is mostly focused on Naomi trying to discover her origins and dealing with surviving supervillains who have survived the destruction on her Earth and have come to this Prime Earth as well. It's kind of a standard teen show with teen with a destiny show, which is a genre of its own. which is kind of charming and breezy, but nothing too special. So if you remember season 1 of Smallville,
Yeah.
Naomi is pretty much that. It's 6.5 out of 10 for me.
Okay.
Finally, I'm going to be talking about Hit Monkey, which is Hulu's latest Marvel show. It is about a Japanese snow monkey who seeks vengeance after the slaying of his family.
Yeah.
With the help of the ghost of an American assassin, it seeks to capture the heights of the batshit craziness and the adult-oriented comedy of MODOK. But
Mm.
which is the previous Hulu
Yeah.
Marvel show. It kind of falls flat on its face, though. It's
Oh,
hollow
damn.
and silly, not in a good way.
Okay.
Like Hit Monkey is a very one joke character that's very funny for 1 or 2 episodes, but becomes tiresome by the end. So it's a 4 out of 10 for me, unfortunately. Next up, moving back to Netflix,
Mhm.
Isa is going to be giving you a review of Hilda and the Mountain King, which is a full-length movie spun off from one of our favorite Netflix animated children's shows, Hilda. What do you think about the Mountain King?
Oh man, I really enjoyed the Mountain Game. I had a chance to watch this
Yep.
kind of recently. With Hilda and the Mountain King, we pick up directly where we left off. From chapter 13, which is season 2. And when Hilda, who's now a troll, for any of you that have caught up, right, a roll runs away and is petrified by sunlight as she leaves the stone forest. And like this whole bunch of shenanigans kind of like happens as she leaves because she's basically been swapped out in her house with Baba. um yeah, and shenanigans ensue, right? More troll shenanigans ensue, essentially. I don't want to spoil anything, I think, because anybody who has watched 2 seasons of Hilda would be very invested to find out what happens here. um
Mm.
you would think that a kids show, essentially, right, albeit something that we have enjoyed thoroughly for two seasons now, might be a bit of a question mark when it comes to like a full length 85-minute you know uh a film length show.
Yep. Yep.
I think Hilda does very well just in terms of appropriately upping the stakes that we've gotten within the series itself. I think especially just continuing on from season 2 directly, and there is a much darker tone to it without necessarily increasing the adultness of the show, if that makes
Mm.
any sense, right? Like there's an appropriately dark tone still for young viewers that tackles some very interesting kind of philosophies and wisdom, and extending upon that whole allegory that we've gotten for 2 seasons about the trolls being a part of nature and all of that, and humankind needing to live in harmony with nature and finding that kind of middle ground.
Yep.
That sort of moral kind of like comes to a fore with Hilda and the Mountain King. There's stories about dispelling sort of the otherness, living in somebody else's shoes, acts of
Mm.
kindness and betrayal and openness and willingness to change and believe and hear others out, that all culminate in a very compelling and um, compelling and well paced show, right? With stakes that are appropriately high, and with consequences that will basically lead us into season 3 and essentially change the entire place the show has been at for 2 seasons, more or less.
Mm. Yep.
So like outside of being able to discuss spoilers and stuff like that, like Hilda and the Mountain King, excellent stuff. Fully enjoyed this. I just feel like it's one of those exercises where if you're doing a full feature film based off of an animated kind of series thing, like a lot of people try and squeeze as much money as they can out of it. This feels like a very natural progression to the story that we've gotten thus far, and a very good story it is. Uh, but it doesn't feel like one of those cash grabs that you get with like anime films, for example. But it justifies the runtime, right, of having it
Mm.
as a full feature film by making sure that the themes and problems that it tackles are equally as big as the runtime shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. How to rate it in the end?
Oh, I'm gonna give it a solid 7.5 out of 10. Right.
Okay.
I think we
Yep.
gave like season 1 and 8 just because it was something fresh, something new at that point in time. Season
Mm.
2 with all the kind of like social complications of Hilda and the mom moving to Troberg, and the kind of more like school life, slice of life thing didn't feel as magical, right? At the
Mm,
same time. But yeah, it's a solid like 7.5 for me.
yep.
For this, did you catch Hilda and the Mountain King?
Yeah, caught it last year. Actually, at after we recorded the January episode of GE, so
Ah,
that's why we're talking about it here. I think I caught it on the 30th or the 31st,
mm-hmm.
just before the last year ended. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. It's the show is much like the movie. It's
Yeah,
cute and breezy and wholesome and spouts an important message about how we treat others,
yeah,
or the other.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, a lovely little cartoon as always. It's a 7 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
Last topic on this episode is the Remembrance of Earth's Past, which is
Ooh.
the official title of what is unofficially called the Three Body Problem Trilogy.
Okay.
I want to give Lucien credit lah by calling it its proper name. Nobody ever does. Nobody calls it the
Yep.
Remembrance
No.
of Earth Past Trilogy.
Yeah.
But I want to. That's the official name. But if you don't know what it is, it's the Three Body Problem Trilogy. And I read the Three Body Problem a long time ago.
Yeah.
I fought and still do that it was the greatest hard sci-fi novel of the 21st century, and
Mm.
my mind was blown by its boundless imagination, and yes, this expansive timeline and hit spinning real astrophysics,
Mm-hmm.
and a uniquely Chinese communist China centric perspective on gigantic universal concepts.
Yeah.
And after many years, when COVID hit, like in 2020, I finally followed up and read the other two books in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. And oh boy, if you thought the Three Body Problem was great, at least in terms of ideas, in terms of big concepts, in terms of big hit spinning astrophysics, real astrophysics, mind you, Three Body Problem pales in comparison to the scale and scope of its sequels,
Yeah.
The Dark Forest and Death's End.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This was such an epic tale that explored the sociology, psychology, the sciences, the technology, the religions, the environments, the politics, the art forms, multiple interstellar civilizations, human and alien. It spans solar systems, galaxies, and then universes, and even multidimensional planes across billions of years. I've never read sci-fi this ambitious,
Yeah.
and probably will never again. Um, you've recently caught up on most of Remembrance of Earth's
Yes.
Past. What have you read, and what do you think about
Okay.
it?
So in a kind of blaze. So I finished the first book sometime last year. I just finished the second book, and I'm a couple of chapters into the third book.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, I have, well, not spoiled myself necessarily, but I do have an inkling of how wide the third book goes just from our conversations discussing
Sure,
what we've
yeah.
read so far and all of that. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm a couple of chapters into the third book, just past like kind of the new character introductions, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am. Oh man. I've always thought, right, that I'm a big hot sci-fi guy. I've read a lot of sci-fi over the years and things like that. Up till
Mm-hmm.
recently, for me, like one of my favorite sci-fi authors has been Alessia Reynolds, who we've covered
Mm.
before on an episode, a pull list actually, I believe.
Yes, correct.
Um,
Yeah.
and as much as I love Alessia Reynolds, right, like there is something to be said with just skill. Like Reynolds,
Mhm.
an entire kind of universe that he's built that also spans kind of like billions and billions of years and light years feels small in
Mm.
comparison to the kind of ideas that you are confronted with this particular trilogy, or at least what I've read of it thus far. It
Yep.
is mind-bogglingly huge and complex, and it has required me to constantly wiki and read up about what they're talking about, just so that
Sure.
I get an understanding of how that kind of fits into the story. Now, if you're not big on doing your own kind of like reading up on like astrophysics and like,
Mm-hmm.
well, in some cases, quantum physics,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine, right? Like you can continue to enjoy the story, all of that. It becomes a bit more of a black box within the plot, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to that. But oh man, what a ride!
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say that I do remember very distinctly. It felt very difficult coming into the first book, just because I wasn't used to the kind of prose that it is written in, right?
Mm,
We've also talked about like how Alessia Reynolds, for example, has very straight kind of prose style that's very
mm,
direct, and it does feel very scientific. I do feel that there are some things that are lost in translation. There are a lot of analogies at the beginning of the first book, or metaphors at the beginning of the first book that are entirely clumsy or feel
mhm.
clumsy, and I don't know if that's necessarily the fault of the writing itself or a difficulty in translating what is very well known to be like difficult, multi-layered, like Chinese idioms, for example.
Yes,
Um,
I would embrace you to check out if you see asterisks next to the metaphors. Go to the back of the book
yeah,
where the translator Ken Liu, no relation to Liu Susan, but
yeah,
Ken Liu explains in much larger detail that is obviously he can't fit it into the book itself, lah, but he
yeah.
explains the metaphor in much larger
Yeah.
detail at the end of the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really appreciate Ken Liu's notes,
Yep.
especially for like facets of the Cultural Revolution and Communist China that I'm not familiar with conceptually,
Hmm.
and those like really do help me to fill in the world, right? But at the same time, I do feel, especially for the first book, because it does take place in a timeline that we know, or rather like an Earth we recognize,
Hmm.
and our recent history. Um, it does kind of like help to fill in those kind of gaps. Whereas for like the second book and the third book, as we begin to move further and further into the future, like that becomes less important as the fictionalized world kind of like materialize within the story itself.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I feel like all three volumes of Remembrance of Earth's Past, I think the key point of it is that I've never seen a series of books with such a sophisticated imagination,
Yeah.
the scope of which is scarcely rivaled in science fiction.
Yes.
It's nothing like this out there. Liu has this kind of boundless creativity that takes his reader on a trip throughout an entire history that follows the humans' first contact with an alien race, the Trisolarans. It's clear that Liu's biggest inspirations, I feel, were like Isaac Asimov and Arthur
Mm.
C. Clarke,
Mm.
probably because his characters constantly reference Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah.
And by looking at his penchant for clarity amongst or amidst immense complexity, his writing is very clear. It's to the
Yes.
point,
Yes.
so it doesn't overly complicate your brain with already immensely complex concepts. And that's the power of Liu's narrative. The power of Liu's narrative stems from his incredible grasp of scientific intricacies
Yeah.
and the scientific intricacies of the story. And he tackles questions of physics throughout the trilogy that definitely explains insane scientific concepts to the layman. And even though he does explain it as well as he can, and you try to grasp what he's trying to say, specifically with regards to multi dimensions, the first, second, third, fourth dimension, and so on,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And other aspects of astrophysics and all that, it's still difficult to grasp. Like
Oh
the
yeah.
human brain, we did never evolve to. We can't see it because we never evolved, a
Yeah.
concept for it,
Yeah.
and trying to think of it makes my head hurt. And that's the kind of thing that I appreciate with it, like, because he tries to explain it as best as he can, and you can kind of grasp it, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you still feel awed by the immensity of it. And Liu's story also effortlessly weaves in future technologies, like intergalactic space travel and
Mm-hmm.
long-term human hibernation into a narrative that grapples with abrupt and seismic changes to the world in a way, or at least in a way, this sense of rapid change obviously parallels Chinese society, right, from the Cultural Revolution in the 60s,
Yeah.
all the way to modern day post-reform and opening, where an ancient culture has managed to be incredibly flexible and adaptive to new technologies that constantly reface their environments.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, in Liu's trilogy, like humans are constantly faced with the new status quo and are forced to exert maximum effort to adapt and overcome. What do you think about this kind of parallel between communist China and how it had to adapt to how humanity had to adapt in the face of Trisolarans and then bigger revelations later on? Lah?
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that the entire setting is one that we are mostly unfamiliar with, right? And I
Yeah,
have a
yeah, yeah.
feeling that, a lot of the time, a lot of Western critics and readers really took to that because it offered something entirely different in terms of a
Mhm.
point of view for that. The parallel, I think, definitely is something that if you were focusing a lot on the sci-fi aspects of things, you could easily miss. It's definitely woven in such a way that it feels very seamless in terms of
Mm.
like the story's placement within history, right? Of the Cultural Revolution of Communist China and things like
Yep.
that, and the extension of that to the future, right? And even to the far future, and even in terms of the characters that end up at the end of time, right? And all those things that have been like kind of ingrained into their belief system and their worldview, how that plays out is amazing. It is insane to have to think about those things on top of all the major scientific concepts that we have to kind of like fit into the story itself. Um,
Mm.
is it plausible? Most certainly. I don't think you could buy into the story without
Yep.
you know an understanding of what um communist China was, what it is now,
Hmm.
right, and what it will be in the future, without kind of derailing a lot of the character choices that are made, or even like the more meta kind of choices that are made on a global or governmental level that affect the storyline and where we go from there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's incredibly smart, right?
Mm.
I at this point, being just starting into the third book, have a feeling that
Mm.
I'm going to have to revisit this again, and it feels like I might not. I'm just not smart enough, or just not well read enough at this point in time to fully
Yeah.
appreciate where this is going. But I'm fully enjoying what is a very dense, complex, and ultimately fun ride. Just because there's so
Mhm.
much that's unknown.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Dense is the word, and also it portrays a very realistic view of how humanity would react to first contact or an alien threat. Like
For sure.
humanity's helplessness. It's not an Independence Day kind of rah rah. Let's go fuck them up.
Yeah.
Like humanity is literally helpless in the face of an alien threat. Like beyond measure, technologically superior alien threat in the first book,
Yeah.
and then eventually other even more technologically advanced alien species pop up.
Yeah.
The dark you see what I mean when you learn what the dark forest theory is. And then eventually beyond alien species, there are even beings from higher and lower dimensional
Yeah.
planes, and
Yeah.
it's constantly enthralling. It continues to one up himself in asking you to imagine unimaginable but also very very real
Yeah.
astrophysical and cosmological concepts. And like in particular, like for example, in the second and third books, like Liu's description of four-dimensional space
Hmm.
um, makes me like literally nauseous.
Yeah.
Like I feel like vomiting trying to imagine it because I can't.
Yeah.
My brain is just not adapted to
Yeah.
to understand that. And while at the same time, also beyond the great science of the book, it also asks and poses like Battlestar Galactica levels of gut wrenching moral quandaries.
Yeah.
What is the greater good? Should stuff like that? Like the human question, like, is not forgotten,
Yeah.
and the emotion is not forgotten. And these books constantly implement circumstances that test the boundaries of humanity's ability to solve problems.
Mm.
And the series asks fascinating questions about basic value systems we hold as humans and how those systems may respond to extreme situations. And it presents so many instances of, that so many crises that push humanity to the brink, literally and also psychologically. And I think it feels like you're reading the most gripping and expensive alternate history book ever written.
Hmm.
And in
Hmm.
a way, you are, because this is a story of humanity's history, aka the remembrance of Earth's past. Starting from ancient primitive cavemen to the fall of Constantinople in 1453,
Oh yeah.
to the Chinese Cultural Revolution, to modern day, and then to hundreds of years in the future, and then to thousands of years in the future, and then to hundreds of thousands of years in the future, and then finally at the end of the final book, you flash forward to 19 billion years from now. And I personally consider Remembrance of Earth's Past to be, I think, the pinnacle of hard sci-fi literature.
Mm.
There has been no sci-fi saga as imaginative as this, and I truly think there never will be. Like, this is it. This is as far as you can push it, and Liu Cixin has like pushed it very, very far,
Yeah.
like to the point where I'm almost scared when I think about his concepts.
Yeah.
What about you, man? Like, what are your like final like concluding overall thoughts
Oh
about what you've
man.
read so far?
I think what my takeaway, or my biggest kind of takeaway, is that at the end of the day, what is humanity when faced with an almost unlimited, uncaring universe filled with other sapient beings? right? Who at the end of the day are also in their own way looking for their own kind of like identity within this
Mm.
massive in like you can't incomprehensible you
Yeah.
like space and time, right?
Mhm.
And for him to be able to bring us along in this, you know, literally time spanning journey, um and for him to be able to place a character there that we can relate to, that we can have insight to what they are
Mhm.
thinking and be able to draw where those thoughts and those influences come from, their upbringing, their family, their job, their experiences, and who they
Mhm.
are as people, is insane. Like that
Yeah.
for me is kind of the main thing, to be able to place, a piece of humanity at the very end of time, to see what they are like and to be able to bring an audience all the way through that is a feat that I don't think is going to be replicated anytime soon, just in terms of not just the imagination of it, but like the technical ability across these three books, right? Is kind of mind blowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like when you read the first book, I think a lot of people have read the Three Body Problem and haven't bothered to follow up, like, much like me,
Yeah.
and only in 2020 and you in 2021 like started following up.
Mhm.
S- When you read something, a concept as cool as the Sophons, which is like one of the coolest concepts
Yeah.
that I've ever read,
Yeah.
what I can't explain to you what a Sophon is. It's a lot of technobabble if I start to explain what the concept is, but
Sure.
it's the coolest dimensional concept I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
In terms of achieving instantaneous communication over like this,
Yeah.
it's so cool and it's so real. And to hear like people like Adam Savage, whatever, talk about like how real that theory is,
Yes.
is mind blowing. Like I can't imagine that things like this, it's magic. Like that old saying. Like that old saying is technology you don't understand is magic, right?
Yes. Mhm.
It feels like magic to me, and
Yeah.
it's more mind blowing than magic, to be honest. What Liu Cixin is describing here,
Yeah.
and the Sophons in book one are like the least interesting thing by book
Oh,
three.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, let's go into spoiler territory. Just one thing that I came across recently, I really dying to discuss, like
sure.
the fact that the universe the fact that most beings in the universe exist in 10 dimensions, right?
Hmm.
And the basically like um this like this scorched earth policy that
Hmm.
they have done by collapsing between dimensions and eradicating one dimension above them to kill everything that's in it, blew my mind.
Yeah,
I'm just like, what the fuck? Are you serious? Like, that's
yeah.
beyond genocide, right? That's
Hmm.
like, I don't even know if there's a term for that, but the very fact that conflict and warfare and,
Hmm.
like this competition for resources can take place on a universal cosmic scale,
Hmm.
and for it to be explained in that way, like I had to put down the book for a while just to be like, what the fuck am I reading? Like, it's so good,
Yeah.
but my human brain is having
Hmm.
trouble comprehending this, right? And I cannot
Yes.
imagine what it's like writing this, like what kind of brain sits in that head.
Like all the mathematical equations, all say, like, I mean, like the equations don't make sense unless the world once had 10 dimensions.
Yeah.
Like they just don't make sense. Like they don't fit.
Yeah.
So Lucian tries to say that there were once 10 dimensions. The only reason there's only 3 dimensions now is because warfare across dimensions 4 to 10 has eliminated them
Yeah.
basically by folding them down. And there are beings from the 4th to 10th dimensions who have escaped to the 3rd dimension.
Yeah.
And it's a wild, insane concept.
It's
Like
insane.
physics is the greatest weapon that sentient beings have ever encountered. Just like to weaponize concepts like this
Yeah.
is crazy. It's one of the wildest things. These are like not nukes. You're eliminating an entire dimensional space
Yeah.
from the entire universe. It's one of the wildest concepts out there, and you will continue to encounter more wild concepts, especially once. Spoiler alert: the 3rd dimension is gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, crazy. The way that it ends, the way that it ends is quite beautiful.
Hmm.
It can also be followed up, to be honest, in subsequent books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently
If you wanted to, yeah.
there is going to be a follow-up, isn't there?
There was a follow up. There's a fan fiction fourth book that has been
I see.
officially canonized by Lucien.
Amazing. Okay, cool. So I have something to look forward to.
Yeah. The fourth book though is like mixed reactions. It is not quite as good as Lucien because it's not by Lucien, but Lucien like appreciates the effort and he enjoyed the fanfiction so much that he made it unofficially officially like the fourth novel in his series.
Amazing. That is insane. Shout out to all fan fiction writers out there. There is hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. And that was a review for the Remembrance of Earth's Past, aka the Three Body Problem trilogy. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about anti-Valentine films. A lot of painful rewatches coming up, including
Oh my
Closer,
God.
Marriage Story, Blue Valentine. Probably The Lobster is the most fun of the four.
Yeah.
But yeah, but even that has a sort of anti romance message.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll be getting into that for our special anti-Valentine's Day episode, which is the opposite of our Valentine's Day episode last year. We'll be back next month for a new episode of Genre Equality with the Book of Boba Fett, Peacemaker, Legend of Vox Machina, the new Uncharted movie, which is probably gonna suck because it's been on the shelf for 5 years.
Yep.
Isaac's going to talk to you about Demon Slayer, the Entertainment District arc, which will wrap up in 3 episodes.
Yep.
And I'm going to be talking about the return of, hands down, the champion of current comic book saga, who has, been on hiatus for 3.5 years. Brian K. Vaughan finally got off his ass and his back. I know Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples had like, new families and stuff like that, so they had to take an extended break because life got in the way.
Yep.
I get that lah, but like as a fan, I was like very angry, and I'm glad that they, especially where the comic left off, it was very frustrating to have to wait 3.5 years. But it's back and it's great. So I'll talk to you about that in Genre Equality 51.
Awesome.
Any parting words before we head off here?
No. Enjoy yourselves over the Chinese New Year holidays for those of you who celebrate that.
Oh yeah.
All the prosperity and all of that all upon you and your family. I hope you get rich, as Ronnie Cheng has said.
Yeah. And if you're not Chinese, there is the Prosperity Burger back. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
probably
please.
going to order that soon. Okay. Till next time, though. This has been Hit Zero.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.